It's not just because it's a nice thing to do. It certainly is the right thing to do, but it's the right thing to do for some very basic business reasons.
More than a century ago, in an apartment on Chicago's North Side, a 30-year-old doctor by the name of Wallace C. Abbott began making a new form of medicine. Using the active part of a medicinal plant, he formed tiny pills which provided measured amounts of the drug. Little did he know where this would eventually lead.
We've grown significantly since 1888. With 70,000 employees around the world, we're in 130 countries. And our focus and vision is to be the world's premier healthcare company.
We are a company, as you might suspect, having been well over 100 years old, with some pretty enduring values, and that really ties back to our attitude towards social responsibility.
Faith in business has been shaken in the past few years by some pretty poor ethical decisions. The pharmaceutical industry, with its direct influence over life and death, has also endured particular scrutiny. But not every mistake is a deliberate one. Ethics is a topic filled with gray areas and pitfalls. We should note that this is not always a subject companies are willing to talk about. However, Abbott Laboratories sat down with us and spoke about the many challenges they've faced in their efforts to lead the way with respect to corporate and global social responsibility. Charlie Brock has been working for Abbott for almost 25 years as an international lawyer. He's probably been to every one of those 130 countries that Sharon mentioned. As a lawyer, he was more familiar with Abbott's ethics policies than most people, but then things changed.
The company made a decision about 2.5 years ago that we needed to put substantially increased emphasis on this program and coordinate the entire program through one person.
They needed someone with a legal background, someone who was familiar with global operations, and someone with flawless integrity. Guess who they chose? That's right, they promoted Charlie to Chief Ethics and Compliance Officer. Luckily, in this new position, Charlie was able to rely on unconditional support from company leadership.
What some people refer to that the tone at the top is an absolute fundamental condition for an effective ethics and compliance program.
You might be tempted to sit back and say that ethics is very simple, just do the correct thing, but it isn't always that easy.
Abbott employees everywhere that I've been want to do the right thing, but that's an increasingly challenging statement to build some definition around.
A good example of this is the time-honored practice of giving away promotional items to doctors. Today, because of the high cost of drugs, this practice is controversial. Abbott has responded to these concerns, but what do they do if the competition hasn't?
Some companies pay more attention and some less to the rules. I've heard many times over the years when I say to someone, you can't do X, the response is, well, everybody else is doing it, or company Y is doing it, so why can't I? Well, the answer is, let's sit down together and see if we can come with a creative alternative solution that will avoid the enforcement risk, but at the same time enable you to have the operational success that you want to have.
Gray areas exist in a global sense as well. In some countries, for example, what we would call bribery is actually a commonly accepted way of conducting business.
There are many different cultures in the world, many different ideas of right and wrong.
The obvious problem here is that Abbott cannot afford to have fluctuating ethical standards across the company.
I think it makes it even more important that we have done what we did, which is to develop standards, ethical standards in particular, that apply globally so that the company can communicate what management's expectations are around ethical standards.
Abbott encourages compliance to its ethics programs by assuring that everyone, from employees to vendors to clients, understands their code. Abbott conducts ethics-based training via both classes and interactive technology. One CD Rom, for example, puts sales reps into potentially compromising scenarios.
By putting a sales rep in front of, let's say, a doctor who's asking for something that under our operating guidelines we can't provide, and then it forces the user of the CD Rom, the sales rep, to make some basic decisions about how to handle the situation.
In the real world, when mistakes are made, it's crucial that the ethics code be enforced in a fair and timely manner.
When an employee or someone who's working for Abbott has perhaps strayed across the line, we look into it. And if there is, in fact, inappropriate behavior, we take prompt corrective action.
Charlie's proactive ethics training approach has yielded great results for Abbott. The key, he maintains, is education.
It's very important in a regulated environment that we do everything we can to help our employees, in particular our salespeople, understand where the boundaries are.
Abbott's commitment to ethical behavior doesn't stop with compliance programs. The company commits vast resources to social ethics programs through which the company expresses its ethical integrity through every nuance of its business practices.
At Abbott, we call social responsibility global citizenship. It's about everything from how we report to our shareholders on our financial performance. It's about how we treat our employees so that we create a great place to be and a very dynamic work environment. It's about how we ensure ethical behavior in the workplace and we ensure compliance with the laws. It's also about how we look at how we develop and manufacture our products so that we minimize our environmental footprint. You think of the word citizen, which means an organization or an individual has rights and responsibilities. It also means for Abbott taking a stance on issues which we feel are important, not just to our business, but issues which are important to our society.
That philosophy takes Abbott beyond considerations of the ethical pursuit of its own success. The company makes a strategic commitment to philanthropic contribution to charities around the globe, particularly in medical fields, such as the fight against HIV and AIDS.
HIV/AIDS, certainly many people would characterize it as a health issue, and it is one of the most devastating health issues on the planet today. But it's also an economic issue and it's a political issue. And as a healthcare company, our job has been to step back and say, what can we do? And what Abbott is doing is fighting the AIDS pandemic on multiple fronts. It begins first in the labs in terms of developing tests and drugs which can actually treat and eventually one day cure the disease. It means we are fighting it in our workplace in the sense to make sure we have a discrimination-free workplace which ensures employee confidentiality. We have a program called Step Forward which focuses on the AIDS orphan issue. I think the statistics reveal something like 14 million orphans today because of AIDS. And we work with a number of non-governmental organizations to figure out what's the best way we can care for communities who are caring for orphans.
Abbott's most ambitious ethical goal is to inspire other corporations to step up their participation in philanthropic endeavors around the world, a move that would require such organizations to re-examine and redouble their own efforts towards ethical compliance.
With everything that we are doing, even by investing $100 million over the next 5 years, we know that as an individual company, we can't do it alone. And so one of the key things which we are doing is reaching out to others in the business community, in the public sector, to find out how else we can build partnerships which make a difference on the ground that will ultimately save lives, prevent infections, and make a difference.
Abbott Laboratories has certainly come a long way from its humble beginnings on Chicago's North Side. The company-wide efforts leave little doubt that if Wallace C. were here today, he could take pride in Abbott's role as a leading pharmaceutical company, but more importantly, in its role as a good world citizen.